Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike and David and Zach and Luke Eddy. How are you, Luke?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. It is Monday. Zach is back with us after recently having a kid. Congrats, Zach.
Thank you. Other than the fact before we started this, you said I looked tired. So I don't know, Kyle. We're on the wrong foot today.
I don't know about you, but I was perpetually tired for the first many months of my kid's existence. So if you're not tired right now, then you are a very blessed man.
Or I'm just pumping caffeine into me like an IV.
Well, that too. Well, I'm glad you're back. You wanna take it away with Luke here?
All right, we're just gonna dive right in here, Luke.
Man.
All right, so Darth Maul, the second operative available to the Separatist faction. He's one of the most iconic characters in all of Star Wars. Actually, my almost 3-year-old kid was watching Star Wars the other day, and I got him to start saying Darth Maul. And he's pumped to see him every time he sees him now. And you showed us the model. You showed us some, tidbits of the GenCon. Do you mind talking a bit about the creative process that went into behind Maul and, bringing one of the biggest fan favorites to the game?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That process was a lot of fun, and Maul so far has been, one of the funnest units to design. I'm pretty proud of how he worked out, and I'm definitely excited for more info to come out for him. I'm still trying to, it's tough, guys. I'm still trying to hold back some spoilers because, we got to put some stuff in those articles. And you know how Gen Con always goes too. We announce stuff a little bit earlier than we would, normally. So, if we put out too much information right at the get-go, you want to keep that hype train going. But suffice to say, I'm certainly happy to talk about developing Maul. And yeah, he's a character that I think a lot of us were like, we have to make him. We got to get him in the game. Like you said, he's just so cool. He's one of the coolest characters in the prequel films. I mean, as evidenced by the fact that he almost literally came back from the dead. Yeah, I think, let's see, what can I speak to specifically in terms of what went into designing him? There were some goals. One was that even though he's super cool and he should, be a real threat on the battlefield, the Separatist faction doesn't really need or want another 200 plus point or even 175 point character, even with a cheap generic commander coming out, which we will talk about. I think there was still a desire for, to have Maul clock in at a reasonable price point. So that as a goal kind of drove some of the balance in terms of what is his upper power level. And I think what helped too was leaning into that he's a very aggressive character and he has to be played right. There's situations he wants to be in and situations he very much does not want to be in. He doesn't want to be caught out in the open against a gun line, for sure. He wants to get into melee, and he excels at while he's in melee. But he's very much focused on that. So that was a driving factor in designing him. And also what I alluded to a little bit when we were talking on the FFG GenCon stream that we did was just sort of trying to get a sense of his sort of flexibility and how he kind of flows in combat. We see him in the Phantom Menace. I mean, he's almost effortlessly fighting Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn at the same time. We didn't want that, or I didn't want that to translate into oh yeah, he can just beat two characters. Less so that, and more so that he's just very versatile. The player has a lot of choices while playing him. So yeah, I think once more information, the card itself, once that comes out, the big linchpin, the reason I can't just allude to it more is it's how Joyo mastery works. That basically is the thing that is driving the character. That's the little engine going on, is that keyword entirely unique to him. That if I were to say what it is, it'd give away the whole unit. But I'm looking forward to people seeing it for sure.
All right. So I know that when you're developing something, it takes a long time. But I know that entire time that you're developing Maul, I just know that Luke was sitting at his desk thinking about me playing Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he says, how do I destroy Zach Barry's life? And you did that in the form of Darth Maul's One Pip, Duel of the Fates, which just basically says, Obi-Wan, hello there, and just rips it in half. So do you want to talk about the theme behind that card and how much you wanted to destroy my life?
Yes, that and having the Duel of the Fates theme playing through my head the whole time, of course. No, that was well, side note, it was a lot of fun to name Anakin and Maul's command cards. There's some like real obvious good ones in there. But yeah, that card's mean. I mean, obviously Obi-Wan Kenobi, that seems like that's the case that you're fearing the most. But there's some other not great matchups out there that card kind of shuts down. Yeah. Whether you're playing Luke, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Do you guys have off the top of your head any other cards you're fearing that interaction with?
I mean, it completely shuts down Fear and Dead Men, which is miserable.
Ah, yes, that's right. Yes, it does.
Knowledge and defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Last
knowledge and defense. Annoying. Yeah, all of those. Yep, all of the above.
Tauntauns in general.
Yeah, even Tauntauns. I mean, that's sort of more like an incidental. That wasn't like a design goal for Maul. Like, yeah, he's got to be really good against Tauntauns because like that's super thematic. But definitely shutting down Jedi. I mean, it's not like actually shutting down is maybe a strong word. It wasn't like, yeah, Maul's going to be a hard counter against every Jedi, but more like, hey, sort of what I was saying earlier, like, what is he good at? What do we want him to do? And we want him to be, a duelist. We want him to be like, he's in a one-on-one melee with another Force user character. He probably has the advantage. And that's something we wanted for him.
Yeah, I think that's great. I as much as it's going to give me nightmares for, years and years, it is a great thematic card, and I'm excited to see it on the table until it gets played against me, and then I'm going to probably cry a little bit.
You got to rip up the hello there.
Yeah.
And eat it. It's also specified. Rip it up and eat it.
Yeah, I'm going to drop hello there. I'm going to take a standby, 3 dodges, 2 aims, and I'm going to spend 0 of them because I'm engaged with Maul.
Yep. He's got that disengage there too, just to make sure it gets shut down.
Yeah, which is adding disengage into that card is really a great call too. Just because the way he like moves between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon is just great.
Yeah, well, and that was in there. I mean, it's nice for some situations where like, that's what you're trying to do is move between 2 different targets. Like, it's just a nice keyword, honestly. And, ever since we added that to Operative Luke, it's kind of been a thing where it's like, yeah, that's a pretty easy one to add here and there to other characters who want to be able to do that. But I mean, it's also nice to have in there too, because the second part of his card could just totally whiff if you're like caught in another melee you don't want to be in, so we didn't want to have that be a scenario.
So I'm going to ask you some similar questions about Anakin Skywalker. We know that Anakin is sort of like he's the former life of like one of the greatest villains ever conceived, which is Darth Vader. So I wanted to ask you, what was your thought process? Like, what did you think like Anakin should be capable of?
That is a good question, because that was another sort of with Maul, same with Maul, where it's like, this is a really awesome character. What is the upper limit power level of this character, of Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, And, there's a lot of different like snapshots of that character we could do. I know before he came out, some people kind of, had a hint that he would be coming to Legion, and there's a lot of speculation about like, what version of Anakin is it? And, ours does sort of tend towards the Revenge of the Sith Anakin. But again, with Maul, it's like, I mean, there are characters who can be awesome at, high point values, really expensive point values, but you start doing too many of those and it's just hard to run those characters together. it's hard to fit those characters into a list. They start to blur together too. It's less distinction between characters. And so, similar to Maul, one of the design goals with Anakin was like, what can we do to portray this character accurately, but also keep his points cost relatively modest? So, with that as a design goal, it dovetailed pretty seamlessly with the other like cool idea for Anakin, which was the permanent command card, which was something I think ever since that keyword was added to the, like when Alex was adding that keyword to some of Padme and Cad Bane's cards, at one point it was just text on the card, or it was like, don't discard this card. And I had at that point, this gives you a window into how far ahead we work on things. Like I was already starting preliminary work on the wave with Anakin and Maul, while he was still doing development for the series of products, which aren't all even out yet with Cad Bane and Padme. But I was like, hey, that would be great if that was a keyword, because instead of having to write out that text, we could just have that in the rule book and be a thing that shows up on command cards. And like right away, I was like, it'd be dope if Anakin had multiple permanent command cards. And so that idea morphed into, well, how about all of his cards are command cards, or all of his command cards are permanent cards? And that's a way to sort of mitigate the power level of the character, where like he starts lower, almost more sort of a mid Clone Wars Anakin. He hasn't attained the rank of master yet. But by the time you get them all out, you're looking at a character who would, with all of those as passive abilities, just on his unit card, would have absolutely clocked in at over 200 points probably. So that was sort of a design solution to one of our goals. And the other thing that was nice too is, man, there's just a frick ton of keywords I wanted to give Anakin because he's cool. And it's like, I can't even put all these on his unit card. So it was just real convenient to be able to put a bunch of those on his command cards instead.
So you're sort of like, well, we see Anakin's growth over the course of the prequels, right? Because we start when he's like a little kid, and then we progress through, and then eventually he gets into the suit, right? So this multiple permanent command card thing, right? This is like supposed to be symbolic of sort of his burgeoning power, and like I guess it ultimately proved to be a power you couldn't really control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yes, and what was cool too is then the other thing I started playing with was giving these cards drawbacks, and you can see it on the one that we revealed, but they all have some sort of drawback like that, and exactly what you're saying. Like it all sort of like dovetailed together nicely, where the cool design idea alleviated some other design issues, like having too many keywords. But then it also supported the theme that we were trying to do of like, hey, this is a character we see grow, and then it also in a way it let us portray a character without having to really super like narrow down which version of him he is, like, hey, if you want to like kit bash, or sculpt yourself like an earlier, Clone Wars Season 1 or Attack of the Clones Anakin, like that works. His cards aren't inconsistent with that. You're just sort of building him in power as he plays, in a short term over the course of the game, as sort of a thematic nod to his growth over the series and into Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, and it's like you said, there's just so many versions of him throughout the saga. You just have your pick. Like you have Padawan from Attack of the Clones. You have Hayden Christensen's rendition in Revenge of the Sith, and then of course you have the Clone Wars, the Dave Filoni Clone Wars version of him. And that was, for me as a player, I was like, oh man, when they put Anakin in this game, what are they going to pick? I wanted to ask you a little bit about his 3-pip that has been revealed. I'd love for you to discuss it. I think it's Hero of the Clone Wars, I think is the name of it. Yeah, could you just discuss what's on that card?
So that card, incidentally, went through the most iterations. His other cards were pretty easy because those were all, those had a lot of sort of what I've been alluding to before, where there's like keywords and abilities that's like, oh yeah, Anakin should have that, but I'm out of room on his unit card. Hero of the Clone Wars started off, if you look at the art, which is amazing, This is my favorite piece in the whole set. It's Anakin, and it's Obi-Wan, and it's Rex. And so a little behind the scenes here, that card started off as every round you could pick whether Anakin had teamwork Obi-Wan, teamwork Rex, teamwork Padme. I think at one point teamwork R2-D2. Because, those are all cool interactions that, those are all like, that's that core cast of characters in the Clone Wars TV show. But that was kind of busted, so we didn't do that. But what we found in testing Anakin further was something that sort of I'll give here. How about a spoiler? You guys want a spoiler?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this isn't a huge one. This is so temper your expectations here. But obviously Anakin he's a general in the Clone Wars. He leads the 501st, and he does a very good job of it. Relatively speaking, Anakin mostly is a good leader in that he comes up with a terrible plan, but he's Anakin Skywalker, and he does it himself, and therefore it works. So speaking, touching back on what I was saying about finding ways to portray a character but not go overboard, portray a cool character but not go overboard with how good they are. Anakin doesn't have, one of his downsides is he doesn't have any command slots for his upgrade, and no command upgrade slots. So that was obviously something that was a little contentious in playtesting. And, at the time, I feel like it's a little less essential now, but aggressive tactics, that's an important upgrade card for commanders. I'm sure you guys can attest to that. And so there was some pushback against him not having that slot. And I felt like it was important to distinguish him in a way from not just Obi-Wan, but there's going to be more Jedi characters as well. And a lot of those Jedi characters we see leading in way more traditional ways. So to help distinguish Anakin, and again, to help sort of mitigate what his total power level is, sort of look for ways to sort of add in some intentional deficiencies, decided not to give him any command upgrade slots. But players still wanted some way to sort of reflect his command ability, and more specifically, some way to still buff people around him. And so this card basically became, instead of what was the original iteration, a sort of mini aggressive tactics by just playing the card itself.
I love it because it's sort of like, you recognize the strength of that card. But at the same time, right, like these stacking effects are I assume they're going to make up for, obviously I can't fish any more than I've already fished. But actually forgive me. I have one more thing I wanted to ask you about, which is this orange card that we saw on
yes.
camera. And I want to know if that card has anything to do with Anakin's hatred of sand.
Yes, I was. Yep, exactly. It's I hate sand, and it's coarse and it gets everywhere. Not like you. But it's you all the Anakins are going to ship with a little bag of basing sand, and your opponent gets to just scatter that on your minis. It's sometimes we have to be thematic.
So I gotta ask, did you get that from listening to our cast a couple weeks ago, or is that something you came up with on your own?
What, the joke about basing sand?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't your cast. I'm sorry. I did see someone else.
Right.
It was I think I was watching some other reactions to it, but I'm sure it's an easy joke to make. So, great minds think alike. That's the. Yeah.
Here I am thinking he was talking about David and some salt.
Yeah,
I mean, I do that to my. It's really funny because when I used to play X-Wing, I used to travel around with this little salt packet in my bag just for such occasions.
Nice. Yes. No. That GIF of the Last Jedi, of the guy licking the ground on Crate, has I've seen it used to great effect in forum posts. No, I can actually talk seriously about that card if you guys would like.
Oh, absolutely. Bring it on, man, because I'm loving everything you're laying down here.
Awesome. No, I mean, so that's one we're gonna save to spoil later, but I will touch on the fact that like I've sort of, I mean, I've said on the stream before how it's a flaw card is what we're calling it. It's very similar to a command card. You give it to your opponent, and your opponent plays it against you. It's something that we're going to see a lot more of. There's other characters who, like, very much so have, flaws in their personality. And to touch on what I was saying earlier, similar to the command cards that sort of grow Anakin as a character and being able to, like, portray, a character who has a couple different iterations or growth, over the show or the media or films. A flaw card like that can also, I think, is helpful from a design perspective in terms of portraying theme. Can let us give an allusion to or a nod to other actions this character does that are perhaps, they have sympathy for another side, or they do something detrimental to their own team, or in Anakin's case, I mean, so the card is not, sorry guys, it's not actually I Hate Sand, but it is a reference to, him sort of starting to go down that path of the dark side. And, we weren't going to do, we're not going to, I shouldn't say never, but, for this product, this Anakin, it's not literally a dark side Anakin. We're not doing Anakin post Order 66, and so, with Anakin and with other characters too, there are versions of them later or earlier that evolve and change. And, there's lots of cool characters and things in Legion we want to make. And while it's fun to do different versions of characters, did that for Vader and for Luke Skywalker, and we're planning on doing some more of those at some point. But we don't want to do too many of those because there's so many other characters we haven't done at all yet that we want to get to. So those flaw cards, for Anakin and for other units in the future, it's a nice way to give a nod as well to perhaps another version of that character, that we want to reference, but that we're not going to devote doing a whole entire unit of or a version of.
Does Darth Maul have a flawed card?
He does not. That said, so in the initial graphics in the first stream, the Wednesday stream that John Schaefer was on, that I think accidentally snuck into his spread. So no, Maul does not have a flaw card. Maul is a flawless being of just pure rage and anger.
And he still has his legs.
In this case, he still has his legs. Absolutely.
Can we talk about some of the other units that were spoiled at GenCon? Maybe starting and the design philosophy behind them. Maybe starting with the specialists.
Yes. Yeah. So here's a question. I'll poll this group here. Which are people more excited for, the generic clone commander or the generic droid commander?
So you mean the Kyle Dornbos droid? I think that's what we're most excited for, is to see Kyle on the table in disco pants. But as a clone player,
did you see that Sam Witwer tweeted that droid side by side with John Travolta?
No, but that's fantastic. I have to go look that up.
Yeah, I'm definitely most excited for the T series personally.
Yeah. I'm not excited because the T series probably means more tank lists. And as a Rebel player, high velocity cannons make me sad.
Yeah, that AAT cannon's mean.
Well, I'm super pumped for the clone specialist because I could do with a cheap clone commander. Rex is still, he's really good, but he's still a little bit on the expensive side.
It's true. He's real good though. Yeah, I think it's I think reflective of what you guys are saying. Something I've alluded to before is that even though they have the same points cost, and they have generally the same abilities, the droid's stats are terrible, relatively speaking. He has a bad melee attack. He has a subpar ranged attack. He doesn't have great saves, but like having that cheap commander for the Separatists is so good. So yeah, I think it's going to open up a lot of interesting lists. Like you say, more tanks. But for both the Clone one and the Droid one, something we tried to do that wasn't necessarily a design goal with the Rebel and Imperial ones, but was very much so with these, was to make them desirable enough that you would honestly consider taking them in an army where you already have a commander. So they have some interesting new abilities. I will say right off the bat, just so people don't get too excited, they don't have Entourage B1s or Entourage Phase 1s. You're not going to have to worry about like total MSU unit activation skew. But they are definitely intended to encourage some of, I guess, the list you guys are talking about, where there's some expensive units you want to fit in and still be able to fill out a modest amount of core units. And I think also, like, I mean, we tested it a ton and it certainly didn't break the game, but if people want to go like for horde mode with these guys and put as many B1s or cheap clones, even though, relatively speaking, clones aren't that cheap, into a squad or into an army, they can with these guys if that's what they want to do.
So I think you said in the GenCon stream that they have brand new keywords. Are those the and you said the reason for their stat spread. Also, I'm thinking of the GenCon stream is that those abilities are more useful for the droid one than the clone one. Do they have essentially the same keywords?
Yeah, they do. They each have a new. There's 2 new keywords that they both have, and they're not very complicated, though. That was another design goal overall with the whole wave was it's never possible to completely get away from making new keywords in Legion often, because so often what we want to do is dictated by the source material, by Star Wars. Just the units we're making, the characters we're making, often will be like a thing they do that we want to emulate, and that requires making a new keyword. But the ones on these guys are riffs on existing keywords. So you're not going to see them be like, oh my gosh, I got to learn a whole nother keyword. But, you'll be like, oh, this is just a different version of this. So, leave that open to speculation. But, those will be fully revealed when their articles come out with their unit cards.
Can you talk at all about the command cards that come with these packs?
Yeah. So we saw the 1-pips, and something that, I think I designed the original Rebel and Imperial 1-pips. And so, like, even me, the designer, I can admit they came out a little lackluster, if you're familiar with covert observation and sabotage communications. And, if I were to defend myself a little bit, there was some hesitance towards ambush is good. 1-pip, activate 1 unit. It's a 1-pip. It's a great card. It seemed something I didn't want to do was just upgrade ambush because it was already good. In hindsight, though, really the orders, the units you can issue orders to with those 1-pips are pretty restrictive. It's just a special forces or an operative, I believe. That already is some built-in restriction. And so the ability on the card was intentionally very mild. But, with that restriction on there, it didn't need to be necessarily as mild as it was. So for these new generic command cards for the clones and the separatists, they were spiced up a little bit. So they have the same effect where when a vehicle is issued an order, you issue an order to a new nearby clone or droid trooper, respectively. And that's real good. But it still has that restriction in there of, well, you have to have a vehicle. So it's still sort of forcing you to, it's not universally applicable. You are only going to run it if you have a vehicle, obviously, because it's a dead card otherwise. But it's not so mild that, it's not just, you're not just forced to use it because you took a generic commander. If you have a commander, let's say you have Grievous, but you want to run a tank as well, maybe a staff, you might actually use that card instead of ambush, hypothetically. So that was something we wanted to do with those. So those are a little spicier, and that's intentional. And then the other cards, and you're going to see in there, similarly, they all have some sort of restriction on what they actually give they issue an order, what kind of units they issue orders to. So the ones in the original Rebel and Imperial ones all were like divided up by rank. the 1 pip was specialist or operative, the 2 pip was heavy or support, and then the 3 pip was core units. For these, it's divided by unit types. So as you saw, the 1 pip is vehicle. The 2 pip, if I recall, I think the 2 pip might be rank. It's commander or heavy. And then the 3rd pip for each of these, so here's a little spoiler for you guys. The 3 pips for those are, the clone one is 3 clone troopers, and the separatist one is 3 droid troopers.
I'm super excited about them just because of the names that we can see in the spread.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, do you like those super sneaky spreads they made?
Yeah, with literally just the command card names and nothing else.
Yeah, and also just just a hint, like a taste of art on the sides of the upgrade cards.
Speaking of upgrade cards, can you talk a little bit about the other stuff, the other specialists that are in these packs?
Yeah. So the clones get kind of exactly what you'd expect. It's a officer, a medic, a engineer, and a comm specialist. So we didn't diverge too wildly for these guys, but as I've talked about, to sort of add to shake it up a bit, and I think it's thematically appropriate, the medic and the engineer don't have non-combatant, so they contribute dice to attacks. But to balance that out, and also because just generally the value of a wound, whether it's a vehicle or a trooper, is relative to the units that are in or around the unit with that ability. And in the Republic, the general cost is much higher. So without, if they were to heal 2 wounds each and have not have non-combatant, those would have gotten to be pretty expensive upgrades. So to sort of still keep their costs relatively reasonable, they only heal 1 wound each. So there's a pretty easy, hey, they lose non-combatant, but they only heal 1 wound.
And what about the droid pack?
The droid pack, similarly, you get a medic and a repair droid, but kind of back to how the Rebel and Imperial ones work, those are strictly non-combatant droids, and they each heal 2. But kind of like what I was saying before, though, where the costs are relative to the units around them, the medical droid for the Separatists has fewer heal targets. Not necessarily like the individual wound costs are less. In fact, in some ways, it's sort of more because it's characters like Grievous and Dooku. But the medical droid itself has less immediate utility, whereas the repair droid, the little PK series worker droid, created in that little B2 head or B1 head, he has plentiful targets for his repair ability, and we also didn't want it to be like, well, I'm never going to heal the squad he's in of B1s because those wounds are too valuable. So unlike previous specialist packs, the droid that heals wounds clocks in at fewer points than the one that heals the vehicles. It's an interesting little reversal there.
Can you tell us which one is which?
Oh, you know what? Wait, hang on, guys. I literally just lied. The wound one does cost more, but not by much. Relatively speaking, it doesn't cost as much more as the other ones have in the past.
Okay, so the medic does in fact still cost more than the...
Yeah, but only 2 points.
Okay. Which one is which? We were trying to figure out if the guy with the boom mic and the turntables was the medic.
Well, the DJ, he's gonna heal your ears. It's therapeutic.
Okay.
Do you guys do you recognize what either of those droids are from? What media? You're on the spot now. I'm asking you guys questions.
So is the medic droid from Grievous, from the Clone Wars episode where they go to Grievous's lair?
Yes, 100% yes. In fact, I think the episode is even like Lair of Grievous. Yes, that is Grievous's personal healing droid.
I don't
Now,
know
is that droid based on the droid from Jabba's sail barge?
Yes, they are both EV series droids.
Wow.
Good job. David gets a point.
I thought I was a nerd until you guys started nerding out.
Oh yeah, no, we're super nerding out. Do any of you know what the PK droid is from? The little worker droid?
No.
No, really? No? You guys are losing some Star Wars cred here. They are in the Phantom Menace. You see them in the background.
Are they like the little dudes working on the pods or something?
No. They're the little dudes cleaning up the broken battle droids after the Battle of Naboo with the Gungans.
Oh, okay.
So
This
they're
is a deep cut.
It's
That
like
is a deep cut.
I am throwing on a Phantom Menace after this now.
Yeah, it's real. The only other time you see them is in a background shot in the Trade Federation ship. They walk through a corridor that has the door open that you can see into. So,
Luke Eddy over here schooling us on our
hey
Star
man,
Wars.
this is part of my job, just looking up Star Wars stuff all day long. Do you know how many hours I've spent on Wikipedia? Hundreds.
Hundreds. Wow. That's how many hours would you say you spend a week doing that?
A week? Well, I mean, that really varies depending on what stage of a project I'm in. On a regular basis, like, I don't know, there's usually something that comes up, so maybe an hour or two every week. But like when I'm researching a project, you know, I'm in a given week, you know, I might be on there 2 hours for the whole week, 2 hours a workday for the whole week, or more sometimes, you know, if it's really that research stage.
Nice.
Well, I mean, and that's not including too, you know, StarWars.com has a database and rewatching stuff, looking up YouTube clips, stuff like that.
So, do you actually like get paid to watch like Star Wars movies? Like, is that within your job purview?
No, I haven't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I could. Maybe I should ask. You guys are raising some good questions here. But no, I usually actually watch the stuff outside of work time. So
hey boss, can I get some overtime for some research?
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Can you talk about the fourth model in this droid specialist pack?
Yes, another not as deep a cut, but the Viper Recon droid, which appears throughout the Clone Wars TV series and is a precursor to the Imperial Viper probe droid. He is. That was where we knew we couldn't do a comms guide because that's makes no sense. That's nothing. Droids have that. So he kind of just came out of a list of what are droids in the Separatists that would be on a 27 millimeter base. And so it was much less so of a like, here's an idea for a thing, what droid would do this, and more so of like, hey, just what are the droids out there? And he was the most obvious one. In fact, at this point, I'm not sure if there even is another one. There's a lot of other droids, but very few that would be on that size base. They generally get much bigger. So given just what he was, we decided what he was before we decided what he does. And similarly, with Maul, we knew we were doing Maul for a while. But it wasn't until like right before we were approving the project, so like before we'd actually started design, but had already like done research and thought about like, you know, what exactly are we portraying, you know, et cetera. But had the idea of like, you know, hey, why not do some of his probe droids just because they're cool? I mean, that was another thing where it's like, hey, this is cool. Let's just do it and then figure out what it does. Sometimes that's how it works. And that's a lot of times how it works with Star Wars. We're like, hey, this thing is awesome. That's what we're going to do. Now let's figure out what it does. And it was pretty easy, though, to be like, okay, well, we've got this Viper Recon droid and we've got Maul's Sith probe droids. And yes, of course, someday we're going to get the Imperial probe droids. It will happen. That there's just droids like this in Star Wars. And we're like, why not give them all a similar type of ability? So
We've got them on record.
yeah, there you go. I mean, I'm not saying when, but like, I mean, I think Alex has even said it too, like, oh yeah, we'll do those guys eventually. Yeah, probe droids, man, they're just a thing in Star Wars. So like, let's figure out a thing they all can do. And it seemed easiest to like, we try not to go too crazy with adding new tokens to the game, but this was an instance where it was like, okay, this isn't going to be everywhere, but this is more easily accomplished by a token, because it doesn't make sense for them to be all attacky, to actually be combatants. They don't have non-combatant, by the way. They do have an attack, Maul's droids and this one. But that shouldn't be their primary role. So we just came up with a mechanic and a token, and they're gonna both use it.
Can you talk at all? So we actually, it's been a while since you've been on here, and I think since then we've had Clan Ren and Inferno Squad get fully previewed. Can you talk about the design philosophy behind them as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It sounds like people are relatively excited for those. They're pretty cool.
Oh yeah, very excited.
Nice. I would say that so those were units that Alex did the design work for, but it was something that we discussed together quite a bit, and I think actually they were something. I should back up, because we oftentimes plan out what we're doing. As I said, like, here's something that's cool we want to get into the game. We oftentimes have products planned out for a couple of years, and something may have been someone else's idea, but then a different person is the one who does the actual development work. And in this case, I wouldn't say, I think it was Inferno Squad was kind of a given, since we were doing Iden, and Clan Ren was just something I personally really wanted to see and thought would be cool, and thought like, Mandalorians are awesome. Let's get them in the game. And I think what we see in Star Wars, they're generally the good guys, and it made sense for them to be. I mean, obviously you have Boba Fett and Jango Fett, but technically, those guys aren't Mandalorians. They just stole Mandalorian armor. Apparently, that is canon.
You took my nerd. You took my nerd thing away. I was gonna be like,
were you gonna drop that?
I was like, I finally had something to say nerdy.
No, that's okay. That's okay, Zach. You still got a point too. For those keeping score.
Yes, I'm on the board.
Yes. But yes, we're like, let's make them for the Rebels, because that is what they do in Rebels. That they, some of the Spectres help Clan Ren, and then when the Spectres and the Rebels need help, Clan Ren returns the favor. So they made sense as a Rebel unit. And one of the goals, or one of the ideas, that I had, that then Alex took and ran with, was, getting some named characters in there. The very first thing we did that with was the Pathfinders, and we're like, people like that, people dig that, and a lot of it came out of talking about Fives and Echo. And Fives and Echo are, if you're into the Clone Wars, those are characters who are near and dear to your heart. They're awesome characters in that show. But again, there's so many cool things in Star Wars. It's like, like, it'd be awesome to do those guys, but like, how long is it going to take before we can do 2 operative expansions, or like a dual operative expansion or something like that. So out of the desire to get characters like that into the game sooner rather than later, we were like, hey, let's leverage this unique upgrade concept, and let's get some of these guys in the game. And not to say they wouldn't hypothetically appear later, but it was a way for us to acknowledge these characters and make miniatures of them. And that's the main thing, is making a miniature of these characters. And it just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of came together of like, not the BX droids, obviously, but for Inferno Squad and ARC Troopers and Clan Ren, to all take advantage of this idea of like unique upgrades, unique character upgrades. So that was a big impetus. Like that was sort of the starting vision for those, and then from there it was just like making them cool. And for the two, I know we're mainly talking about Clan Red Inferno Squad, but for the commandos, not commandos, the ARC troopers and the BX droids, to give the new factions that strike team option as well.
That's a really neat way to sort of like address the. I mean, it's a good problem to have when the supporting cast of the IP you're trying to make miniatures for is so huge.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, it's a good problem to have.
So I'm gonna ask the question that I think is so clear in everyone's mind now. When are we getting Bad Batch?
Oh man. Well, so I mean, hopefully soon. I'll tell you what. Sometimes that often happens. What often happens is, we work with LFL obviously, and they give us info ahead of time. No surprise there. But sometimes they can't give us quite as much info as we'd like. And so honestly, it's serendipitous sometimes when it works out, where like we get to know, like we didn't know about Bad Batch being announced ahead of time, but definitely glad it's been announced now so that we can say like, okay, hey, let's wait a little bit, get some more info on this new iteration and maybe incorporate that into what we're doing before, we were to say, rush into making these guys based off of, the only appearance we have of them so far. Now knowing, that like they're going to get more development, we're going to see more of them, So absolutely Bad Batch. Like they're perfect for this sort of unique character strike team thing. And I think, when we do them, I'm sure we're going to expand how that mechanic works in interesting ways that sort of accommodate multiple characters. Now, the downside, the issue, of course, is like these unique character upgrades get expensive. And you start putting them all into one unit, like, man, you got one real expensive unit. So, there may be some, work on like, well, how many can you take at once? And you're like, oh, kind of like what I was saying with Anakin and Maul, you're like, well, what is actually the upper limit of their power level, etc. But absolutely, Bad Batch is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, not to go off like on a tangent, I love a lot of things about this game, but I think my favorite thing going forward is the design space that you've made here with these quote unquote lesser named characters, with the health patterns that you're giving them with extra health and making them into these squads. I just think the design space there is just, you really set yourself up for, stuff like Bad Batch, which is great.
No, that's good to hear. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, and I think there's other characters who we could do this with, but like we're not going to, because I think like it's more important to like really do that character justice, So there's some like we may hold off on, but there's other things we could do too. We could do a pack of like just these guys, and it doesn't come with a unit, but they go into existing units, something like that. So yeah, no, it definitely opens up some interesting design space for us.
So real quick, I want to hit just specifically with Clan Ren and Inferno Squad. How did you go about differentiating them from like other elite full squad special forces units within their respective factions?
That is a good question. Yeah, I mean that was primarily Alex's hard work that he had to do, and I think it was certainly easier for Clan Ren because with Mandalorians. I'm doing air quotes. You guys can't see me, but I'm doing air quotes. Mandalorians, because again, Boba Fett, and he's not really a Mandalorian. But anyways, like so much of what is like what represents their sort of armor and mobility in game is through stats, like not keywords. So stats referring to their movement speed, their die save, all the different, the plethora of upgrade slots they have. There's some, and then a couple abilities as well. So, you obviously jump and impervious, they have jetpacks, and of course the armor. So it was pretty easy to be like, okay, that's 90% of a Mandalorian Special Forces unit. Making Inferno Squad was much harder because they're a little less differentiated. I mean, we say Inferno Squad, but the official name of the unit is Imperial Special Forces, which, yes, we know is confusing. That is canonically what they are called, and we couldn't call them something else. Suffice to say, there's a lot of Imperial Special Forces. How are these different? And so I think what was easy a little bit is that Iden came first, in that Alex was able to draw on some of the defining features of Iden to sort of mirror some of what Inferno Squad is doing after what Iden is doing. So obviously Marksman, and then Infiltrate were the main ones there. But then I think beyond that, it was a matter of kind of massaging them to a place where they feel really capable, but they also don't feel like, the be-all, end-all, ultimate special forces ever. They have reliable, which, reliable plus red die with no surge is essentially, having that better armor save, like the best armor save, like Death Troopers, but it only matters for one shot, So, well, depending on what you roll, I guess I should say one shot, but so, it was kind of just a balancing act of like, where do they fit, because, there's a lot of special forces already. So, and, these guys don't have like any crazy different weapons or anything like that. So most of the character for them came out in the unique upgrades, and kind of for Clan Ren as well. Like I said, like the Mandalorian stat block and those couple Mandalorian keywords are pretty much dictated, but it's on Tristan and Ursa where, we played around a little more and made them a little more unique. And then similarly for Inferno Squad, Hask and Gideon, was where, or Gideon, Hask and Del Mico is where, we played around a bit more with different ranges, different abilities, that sort of thing to spice it up.
How psyched were you guys when, like, you guys saw, like, The Mandalorian and there was actually, like, a bunch of, like, I don't know, like, what are they, live action Mandalorians, like, falling out of the sky, and, like, clearly you guys had, this unit. I mean, they're not meant to be the same thing, I assume, but they seem very close.
Yeah, no, that was super cool seeing that. I mean, Clan Ren was like, we were working on that while they were working on the show, but we didn't start off by saying like, hey, we want to do these secret Mandalorians that are going to be in this show that like people only know is in production and haven't seen any of yet. Like, we're not quite, we've done that with some X-Wing stuff where it's like, we're actually designing ships for like, The Force Awakens before the film comes out, but we weren't doing that for these. We specifically wanted to do the ones from the Rebels TV show. But yeah, when those, we watched the Mandalorian show as the episodes came out together in the office, and definitely like almost every episode there was like, that could be in Legion, that could be in Legion. So yeah, we're getting there. I mean, it's no secret that it's Steve Horvath is the head of Asbury North America, who is basically the publishing company for the studio Fantasy Flight. Has said, yeah, hang in there. There's some Mandalorian content coming to Legion.
That's awesome. So with all of the stuff that we've talked about, clearly there's a lot of new stuff coming. What unit out of all this content was your most like was the one that you had the most enjoyable experience kind of designing? From I guess kind of an all-rounder standpoint.
That's a good question. I'd say a kind of almost equally Anakin and Maul. They went through they had the most balanced iterations. So I'm not saying they were the easiest to design. Or like, I guess they weren't the easiest to balance, or to nail down exactly what the design was. But sometimes the hardest part is just getting anything on paper, getting those initial ideas out. And the more thematic a character is, and also the more like, I don't know, I guess attached to a character you are as a designer. Like I was super excited to do both of these guys. I mean, both of these guys, sort of like no one was against doing them, but like I pushed for these guys coming out when they did. I was like, these are two of the coolest characters. We got to do these guys. So I was invested in them, and that makes it easier. And I think one of the things I am pleased about is their core idea, sort of, like your elevator pitch for like what makes them interesting mechanically stayed intact. Like that was functional, and that was for both of them it worked. And it was a matter of just doing the balance work around that idea and some iterations and tweaking it. So both of them were a lot of fun to make and came out really well.
So with all the new things that are coming, it kind of begs the question. This is a two-parter. I know you can't like talk about new stuff more than you already have, right? Because like you said, you got to do something for the marketing department.
I can hint at it. I can allude to it. I can be coy.
But I guess the second half of the question is more applicable. Do you think that Legion could get to a point where you wouldn't need to add anything new with every release, or is that just really crucial to keeping the game fresh?
That is a very good question, and I'm glad you guys are asking it, because I feel like sometimes well, let me put it this way. You guys asking the question is showing me that you, the players, are picking up on some of the tensions in designing stuff. And like just what you stated there is very much the tension of, hey, the more we add to this game, the more complicated it gets. We very, very much tried to sort of have this mindset of, yes, there's a lot of keywords, and yes, there's a lot of potential interactions, but when you build an army, like you only have to know what your stuff does. And yes, your opponent has some units too, but generally, like their abilities, your opponent's abilities, shouldn't be like gotcha type things where it's like, oh, you forgot I had this, you're screwed. It's more, there's a little bit of that here and there, so that you're still like knowing what your opponent can and can't do is important. But for the most part, you need to know what your own stuff does, and you want to have a general idea of what your opponent's stuff does. But it's not like you need to memorize the rules reference. Certainly don't need to memorize every single keyword. So there is that. Absolutely. We don't want to burden the game or bloat the game with too many keywords. But at the same time, you touched on it, like there's this sort of immaterial sort of like you want to see something new and cool. Like when a new unit is announced, you hope that like, oh, they've got some new keyword, and something I alluded to before was how we're not working with our own IP here, our own intellectual property. We're making a Star Wars game. Star Wars exists outside of Fantasy Flight, and what we are trying to do and what people want, the main reason people are buying this game is they want to reenact Star Wars, these Star Wars battles. And there's these pre-existing characters and vehicles and droids and soldiers and things that you expect to sort of do certain things, even if it's not specifics. You sort of want them to act in this way. You've got different kinds of things like repulsors and walkers even and stuff like that, and you sort of expect these pre-existing things to function in this game as they would in the Star Wars media. And kind of like with these droids that don't really fight, these probe droids, recon droids, a lot of times that just dictates us having to make up new rules and new keywords. For example, the Saber Tank and the AAT have that hover ground keyword, and like, well, I don't know. I think it works perfectly fine, but like if we were just making up our own IP and making up our own game, maybe that's something that, would be not even in the game, because it's, just more rules we had to add to accommodate how you see these things interacting and operating in this other media. So, that's not really a very satisfying answer, except to acknowledge that, there is this tension between, wanting to keep the game digestible and simple, but also this sort of new wow factor. And also, again, what's dictated by the IP itself. So are we ever going to stop making new rules and new keywords? I don't think we can. There's going to be some new Star Wars thing that's super cool, and we're like, well, we got to have it do this thing, But as we get more and more keywords into the game, and as we expand the rule set, there are going to be fewer and fewer instances of like, oh, there's nothing yet in the game that could do this. For example, like now that we have that hover ground /air keyword in the game, the probe droids that Darth Maul is going to have, that unit card, will have, I believe, I can just double check, but I think it has like just hover air 1, which like now that that's in the game, we can just reference it to be like, well, they're not a speeder, but they ignore any terrain that is height 1 or lower. No compulsory move, but they ignore that terrain. So yeah, there is, I think, we're moving to a place where we don't have to add as many keywords, but I don't think we could ever get to a place where we're not adding some things here and there, So maybe that's the best answer I can give.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, clearly what you guys are doing is like super complicated from, kind of transitioning stuff from on screen into, game mechanics, right? Like that's not the simplest thing to do without kind of coming up with new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of outside of units and keywords and mechanics and stuff, we had Corey DeVore on last week talk about sculpting and kind of bringing things to life from the screen kind of in his world, and you kind of just talked about it a little bit in yours, and as far as the rules and mechanics and everything like that go. So how do you guys kind of take those two processes and align them kind of behind the scenes, if you can talk about that at least?
A view behind the curtain, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, this is certainly another thing that I appreciate that players have picked up on and shown more interest towards is the work we do sculpting things, and also the work we do with the art in the game as well. So to touch on the process a little bit, there's definitely a lot of coordination between myself as the developer, as the designer of these expansion products, and Corey and the whole sculpting team, as well as whoever is the art director, who is coordinating our freelance artists, and who's ever the graphic designer who's doing the principal graphic design for a batch of products. So generally what a developer does is sort of come up with a vision for a set of products, and once those are approved both internally and through LFL, then it's up to us basically to do, as I've alluded to, a whole lot of research and try to come up with as much information as we can give to the sculptors about, like, this is the thing we're depicting, and to the art director, we need to like figure out like, well, what, sometimes even before we've really finished the design, generally while we're still in sort of first drafts, we kind of got to be like, hey, here's what I think are all the cards that are going to be in this batch of 6-8 products, and here and there, as people have noticed, of course, we grab some pickup art from other product lines like Destiny, if there's some good ones, sometimes X-Wing. But generally it's a lot of commissioning new art, and they need a description of what it's going to look like from us, and they need references. We get official references from LFL, so we have to go through a process with that as well. It's just a lot of coordinating work, and we try really hard to make things accurate. If we're coming up with a new weapon or item, then there's even more coordination where we're like, okay, we need to have LFL approve that we can make up this thing. We need to have perhaps sculpting get started early so they have a rough idea of what it looks like, and we need to make sure that the references that the art director are sending to our freelance artists match. And I shouldn't say it falls all on the developer, because there's also a producer who does a lot of work coordinating all these things as well. But it's a very integrated process, and also collaborative too. When I say telling the art director oh, I need this piece to look like this, what that actually looks like in practice is I think about what it needs to be. I write an art brief for them. It might be something say just off the top of my head, Sabine's upgrade card for her wrist shield. I'll look up pictures. I'll watch the episode. I'll find some screenshots. And then I'll ask our producer if they can request renders from the TV show from LFL of that thing, so that we can make sure it's 100% accurate. And then I sit down with the art director. For a lot of these waves, it's been Preston Stone, who's been on some of our streams. He's played some games. He plays Legion, so that helps. And and then we'll have a dialogue of he'll be like, I think this works, but I don't think the way you're describing it from this angle doesn't quite work, or here would be an idea for a better background or something like that. So it's very much collaborative as well. But a lot of work goes into that. So I do appreciate that people are. Obviously, people are very impressed with how we've improved our sculpting, but I appreciate that people have noticed the quality of the art as well.
Yeah, I'm like you. The Heroes of the Clone Wars card just basically floored me when I saw it. I was like, that is I need that on my wall. My wife's gonna kill me, mind you, but I need that on my wall.
Yeah, it's good, man. No, and kudos to Preston Stone doing the art direction for that wave. And the other thing too is, art directors, a big part of their job is facilitating relationships with a freelance artist that we work with again and again. There's artists who have done many pieces for Legion and for other Star Wars games too, and you can even go through and maybe notice similar styles between cards and pick them out. They're the same artist, but and even sculpting wise too, we do some freelancing there. So there's some work with, developing that relationship with the freelancers, so they have an idea of, what we're looking for, what's useful to us, what sort of details we want to push, that sort of thing. Yeah.
All right. Now that we buttered you up and softened you up, I got one last question here.
All right.
We heard you allude to it on the GenCon stream that there are going to be some Civil War faction units coming out once all of these Clone Wars faction units come out.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess basically my first part of the question is this simply an early push to get the Clone Wars factions up to speed that you're doing mostly Clone Wars releases lately? And then, are there any hints to what those 4 units might be afterwards?
Fishing for some more hints, I see.
Casting the bait.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't hurt, man. Doesn't hurt to ask. I think, to answer your first question, the practical question, the short answer is yes. Yes, there's a push to get more stuff out for these Clone Wars factions. And I think, there was some, we maybe wanted to see a little, we don't always have full control over exactly when new product drops, because I mean the whole supply chain is, yeah, that's a whole nother thing we could talk about too, with production and shipping and factories and international partners and release dates and delays and all kinds of stuff. So we felt like like it's important to sort of bolster these new factions so that I don't think we're planning on having them completely catch up. But we are going to shift towards more of those, more products for those new ones. And even after this, yes, I've said there's sort of these four, if you will, products: Maul, Anakin, the two specialist packs for the prequel factions, and then there's another equal chunk of four products for the original Galactic Civil War era factions. After that, there's going to be another larger chunk of stuff for the Clone Wars. So we're still trying to sort of skew it more towards those new factions. Now, obviously, not to say we're not doing anything for the existing two factions, as illustrated by the fact that I did allude to, well, not even allude to, I said that there'd be some two each for the Galactic Civil War factions. But yes, and I think we're gonna reach a place eventually where it has less to do with catching factions up, and you're gonna see a shift towards theme. Because I'll be honest, Maul and Anakin are cool and these specialist packs are great, but there's no theme there. Maul and Anakin don't fight each other, at least not as we're depicting Maul, and the specialist packs, another product I pushed for because it's important for those two factions. It's not some heavily themed sort of vignette of something. These are just sort of generic clones and droids that we see scattered throughout that Star Wars media. But once we get past sort of, I guess, bolstering these initial factions with, not to use it in a pejorative sense, but sort of vanilla stuff, sort of core Republic stuff, we're going to see a lot more, I think, thematic clumps or batches of units, and products where it's like, oh, these are all from this thing, whether that be this particular part of this movie or this particular arc of the Clone Wars series, or this other Star Wars story movie like Rebels or Rogue One or Solo, or even potentially instead of sort of just sort of slotting in here's Iden, here's Special Forces, we might have a more comprehensive, here's a whole batch of things coming out together from this Star Wars video game. So that's something to look forward to. I mean, same with the Rebels and Imperials. You think of what we've made for the game, we're running out of in a good way. We've sort of gotten through a lot of these are the core characters and units we see, and we're going to start dipping more into this is a specific thematic group of things from this show or film or game or whatever. So that's kind of where we're going eventually once we hit these beats of characters and things that are just sort of again, sort of your vanilla that you got to get in there.
Yeah, and as someone that takes a lot of Star Wars media in, being games, books, shows, everything, you name it, it's just great to know that you're going to be going to that theme. Not that everything hasn't been thematic, like you said. Like you said, it's more vanilla. You got to get them in there, all that. It's always still thematic, but to be able to open yourself up to be oh, well, I don't have to catch up clones and droids. I can do kind of what I want. Again, that opens up a design space, which is great for you, I'm sure. Kind of like a weight off your shoulders. Not not that it's bearing down on you. You need to get certain things out, but it kind of opens you up to be yeah, I can do this now.
Yeah, and it's certainly easier to design things that you plan on them synergizing together at the same time. instead of, here's an example, instead of sprinkling Rebel characters from the Rebel TV show here and there, designing a couple at once, it's easier to bake in those synergies. So yeah, I don't know. Here, you guys, that was your supposedly final question for me. I'll leave a question to you guys. Like, what is some like Star Wars media that we haven't touched on yet that you guys are like chomping at the bit to see in Legion?
I mean, the instant question for me, or answer, not question, is Fallen Order for sure.
Yeah, dude, that's got some dope stuff in it.
Yeah, like I would, the like the Inquisitors in Rebels were really cool, but they were also kind of, I don't know, they weren't they were kind of a little still like kid like in that
it's
show.
okay. It's okay. No one likes the fifth brother, or what is it, the seventh brother. We all know that the seventh sister's the cool one.
Yeah, and I just like in Fallen Order, they're just so cool, and I mean, we can have Cal Kestis too. That's fine. But
yeah, that's okay.
But I really just want the Inquisitors, and yeah, that's.
I mean, there's more. There's more in there too. I mean, sort of an early snapshot of Saw's partisans are in there.
Yeah,
you got the Haxian Brood. Those guys are cool.
Solo for me. I know that movie gets like a little bit of flack, and I get it, but that is like such a fun Star Wars movie, and like someone that I would be like pumped to see would be Beckett, because he kind of taught Han everything he knows to be like this dirty rascal scoundrel, and for the most part, he's actually better than Han at doing it. Until Han figured it all out towards the end there. Spoiler alerts. But he was just a great character. I mean, I also like Woody Harrelson a lot, so maybe that has a lot to do with it. But
a little biased.
Yeah, a little biased. But he was awesome to see on screen, and it'd be cool. Like he's like the gunslinger type.
Yeah, no, he would be awesome, definitely. Yeah, and again, there's more stuff in that film as well we can do. There's the whole Imperial Regiment we see on Mimban with the Mud Troopers and the I forget what its designation is, but the AT artillery thing, I forget what it was, PD or something like that. But yeah, no, or the Mimban Stormtroopers.
I hope I'm saying the name right. Black Kirsanton. I want
Black Kirsten.
Yeah, Kirsten. I want Chewbacca's evil foil.
Bad Chewbacca.
Yeah, bad Chewie with that.
Yeah, man, no, that's something. I mean, I haven't touched on yet, but is 100% on the table too. Is like there's stuff in the comics as well. I mean, there's fewer things there that are like units, like trooper squads or like vehicles, but there's some awesome characters too. I mean, yeah, Black Kirsten, you got Afra and her droids. Well, they're not really hers, but those droids. Yeah.
I don't suppose Trioculus is still canon.
Well, that depends on whether Alex is doing that wave or not, I guess. His favorite character, Trioculus. I don't think Trioculus is canon. I think that might be a bit of an issue.
Is that all you want, Kyle? Is Trioculus?
Well, I mean, if I got to have a like option B, I guess I would say Saw's partisans from Rogue One, and then he's obviously, as you noted, in various other media. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's same. I think, you guys have touched on the fact that, and this is what I was alluding to a little bit too. Like, once we get through like a lot of these core units and characters that we see like in these central films, in the 3 original trilogy and the 3 prequels, and some of the core characters from like the Clone Wars TV show. We want to sort of open up Legion to a whole world of sort of these, subgroups and, factions within factions, and just sort of thematic groupings of units like you guys are talking about.
Well, I'm super excited for the future of Legion. Every time we talk to you, it's always like, just more exciting things on the horizon.
Well, that's good. That's good. I'm happy to instill excitement.
I'm still holding out hope for Chief Chirpa and Logray.
Yes, that's always the like joke, not joke request is the Ewok faction or units. And we'll see about those. No promises on those.
I would legitimately play an entire Ewok faction.
100%.
And
Yeah.
not like tongue in cheek either.
No, seriously, if I could run Ewoks and Wookiees together in the same list, I would run that list like all the time.
That'd be pretty dope. Well, maybe we'll take a poll. We'll see if enough people want to play it, and we'll make it.
There you go. I mean, it's for anyone that has played Battlefront, they have that survival mode where you're like,
Yeah, they did that really well. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, it gives you an appreciation for the murder bears that Ewoks really are.
It's true. Yeah, no, I if I was at that party at the end, I would be pretty suspicious of eating whatever they're cooking up.
Yeah. And Ewok hands you something on a stick. Here, Luke. Go ahead.
Dude, there's all those empty helmets. I'm just,
All right. Well, thanks for your time, Luke. We'll let you get back. I'm very excited for Legion.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and chat with you guys and talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff. No, it's great. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Well, that was Luke. We are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Mike.
I'm David.
And Zach is probably tending to his newborn or something.
I didn't realize I was on mute. I'm Zach.
There you go. And Zach is on mute. Stay fresh, cheese bags.